Very special thanks to Cars of Somerset for providing the vehicle in this review, of course, and as always, I've linked to their website and current stock in particular down in the video description below this video right now. And of course, if you want to check out a vehicle like this in the Somerset area, being as they are based in Ashcott in particular, then of course click that link and see what they've currently got for sale. Hello and welcome to a review which some of you might have a bit of deja vu about. Because, of course, I look different, and this review technically did come out before, but instead of just re-editing this version, which I initially had some technical issues with, and just uploading the same thing again, I thought, you know what, I'm going to make a whole new review. So even if you watch the first one, this is still going to be entirely new, at least in terms of my thoughts. Now, the reason why I decided to do that is because the timeline has changed. At the time, this facelift was the first GTR that I drove. Since then, though, I've driven the older one, a 2007 shape, which I visually prefer. Now then, the timeline is swapped, and my thoughts on this car are more refined in terms of how it compares to the car which it replaced. Now, that one had 850 horsepower. This one is tuned to 650 by Litchfield. And of course it goes without saying when you're talking about pretty much any generation of GTR that for their time they are among the quickest cars around. Now that's actually kind of the problem when it comes to GTRs in terms of what people think of them. There are two things which you commonly hear about the Nissan GTR from people who aren't as much of a fan of it. The first is that it doesn't have enough charisma or personality, it's a little too robotic, it's like driving a computer. And the second thing is that they maybe just don't even talk about it at all because it's, you could say, gotten long in the tooth, had too many facelifts, whatever way they would term it. It's that familiarity breeds contempt kind of issue, which I've also likened this car to the Bugatti Veyron as having, even something like a Lamborghini Aventador or various others that have stayed around for a long time. One notable example which that doesn't seem to have happened to is the Bentley Continental. Funnily enough, people still love that car, despite the fact that it's been out for even longer than any of those that I just mentioned. Now, this particular GTR being the facelift, you would hope does make a difference. And even though I do prefer the older one visually, you can, I will say, feel some notable improvements in this car over that one. Now, the notable improvements that I'm talking about are mostly to do with how smooth it feels. Because even though this has a full 200 horsepower less than that one, it actually kind of feels just as exciting. And it's not just a facelift. This has improved airflow, improved downforce, a number of vast improvements, or not necessarily vast in their own right, but a number of small improvements which add up to a vast improvement are what set this apart from that R35.1, if you will. Now, in terms of what the specs are, the initial car had around 480 horsepower, this is up to 540, so a pretty significant difference for a facelift. The torque is up to 451 pound-feet, and the performance has been verified by independent magazines at around 3.2 seconds to 60. This one can do it in less than 3 due to the upgrades, and the top speed is improved from around 193, 195 on that initial car to around 200 on this one. So a proper supercar in terms of its performance. Of course, the handling is very forgiving. It's one of the issues which certain people have, but I'm here to talk about whether or not that's true. Should you say those kind of things about this car? What does the GTR feel like compared to the cars which have come out since then, many of which I would argue it's actually inspired? And I even spoke in that older version review about the fact that I believe the Nissan GTR has caused more other manufacturers to up their game than any other car since the year 2000. It redefined what an affordable, quote-unquote, performance car could do. 60 grand brand new when it came out is insane value for what it could do at the time, and even what it can do by today's standards. Now, you can buy a GTR, at least here in the UK, in that like 2007-ish kind of shape for about 25 or so grand for a higher mileage one. These ones with the facelift from 2011 to 2016, you're looking at more like 35 to 55 grand, that kind of territory. And according to Litchfield, the of course fine folks who tune this particular one, it's best to buy the newest GTR that you can afford. because much like the Porsche 911, it is one of those cars which gets refined and improved over time, and you can feel that. Now I will say, if you are looking to buy a GTR, that will also depend on what you actually want from the car. Because I believe there are two types of people who might want to buy a GTR. The one kind of person is someone who has always wanted one, loves it for what it represents and what it can do, and under those circumstances I would say absolutely buy the best one, the newest one, the lowest mileage you can get, because you're going to get the advantage and the benefit of all of those updates, for sure. And it is quicker in every way. On the other hand, I think there's a category of people who almost view the GTR as kind of an affordable trump card. The kind of car where you buy it just to say that you have a GTR, knowing that there's barely anything else on the road that could ever beat you, either through corners or in a straight line. If that's the kind of person you are, well, I could see some purists looking down their nose at you, but I wouldn't necessarily say you're wrong. It is kind of a solid choice to go for if you are looking for that, and in that case, well, honestly, you may as well go for the older one, because you're going to get it even cheaper, and if performance is all you care about, well, for 25-30 grand, you're already getting a car which can do 0 to 60 as quickly as a Zonda, and has the top-end speed of something like a Porsche 911 Turbo. So it's more than quick enough for that kind of money, in other words. Now, with that being said, what makes the GTR so good, in my opinion? Interestingly, to go back to the Bugatti Veyron argument, which is another car that people easily get bored of now because it's been around for so long. It's technically not around anymore, but you know what I mean. It's actually just like the Veyron in terms of being not just a fast car, but a good car. It's a car which can simultaneously destroy most other cars in a straight line, and certainly around a track, but then if you want to, you can just potter around town like it's a normal car. It's fairly smooth, it's fairly comfortable, and even the economy isn't that bad. According to aggregator sites, most owners tend to get around 20 to the gallon out of a GTR. And of course that'll depend on your driving style, but that's certainly not bad for a 540 horsepower car, especially not one that can do 200 miles an hour. With that being said, if you want that kind of performance from something that isn't a GTR or a Porsche 911, well, chances are it's going to be something that has almost a total focus on performance with less comfort, less practicality, maybe even something that has to be tuned to reach that level. There are certainly cars which their owners would like to think could keep up with something like a 911 Turbo or a GTR, but most of the time they're not going to, put simply. So the fact that this can be used as a normal car at all is a testament to how well engineered it is. The practicality is good enough for most people who would want, say, a GT style machine, which is really what this is. 2+2, decent trunk space, or boot space as we'd say here in the UK. Of course it has all-wheel drive. Again, a point of contention with quote-unquote purists who find all-wheel drive to be too easy or too boring or too forgiving. I don't see the problem personally. If you don't like that, don't buy it, but don't criticize someone else if they're interested in it. That's the whole point of having a personal preference. And I, on a slight tangent, do kind of hate how the petrolhead community likes to do that so much, but that's besides the point. The GTR can do all of these things. It does tick all of those boxes. So the penultimate question really is, does it lack character? Is that part of what people say about it? Kind of the biggest criticism really, is that true? Does it hold water? Does it lack charisma and personality? Well, yes and no. I would say that yes, in terms of I can totally understand where those people are coming from. Having driven Ferraris, Maseratis, Alfas, Jags, and owned some of those as well, I can definitely say that this does not sound as exciting as a Maserati. It doesn't have as much character as a Jag, and it doesn't have as much panache as something like an Aston. But it is actually a surprisingly fun car, but it's not fun in the same way. The GTR is the kind of car where you have fun because it's all about you as the driver. Those cars, like Maseratis, Astons, even something like a Porsche, you could say, but certainly those other two and many others like them, let's be honest, and I'll be honest for myself, at least half of the enjoyment that you get out of driving it is the smiles that you put on other people's faces. The GTR, simply put, couldn't care less about anyone else. It's all about you. So if you want fun from just going ballistically fast, that's what the GTR offers. If you're looking for fun from a show-off perspective, well then it doesn't do that, because it's not even trying to. It's not the loudest, it's not the craziest, it's not the flashiest. from that perspective, it is kind of a drivable computer, because it's making all of these minute changes and alterations and calculations at any given moment to make you, in effect, the best driver you can be. It's a different kind of personality. Is it the kind of car I would buy? Well, honestly, no, because I, hands up, do prefer cars which are a little bit over the top. I like Mazzas, I like Astons, those kind of cars which do feel like a special occasion whenever you drive them. With that being said, I would not knock anyone for wanting a GTR. It's a very capable car. Of course it's fast, we all know that, and the value for money is insane. If you're talking just bang for buck alone, it can destroy anything under the 30 grand region, especially if you add the caveat that they cannot be tuned. Sure, you could get something like a Golf and put a twin turbo on it, but anything that's stock compared to a stock GTR, well, simply put, for that price, they're going to struggle. Now, in terms of what you should be looking for when buying one, I'm actually going to add a link to Litchfield's own website. Rather than listing things to look out for yourself, I'm going to leave it to the experts there. So if you are on the market for one, in particular a facelift, and if it does interest you what kind of issues to look out for, then click the link right below and that'll take you to the Litchfield website where those issues are listed. Now, some of the issues, to kind of condense that down, involve transmission issues, which they can sometimes have. You'll tend to notice those when driving the car though, so you can fairly easily feel that. There's some condensation that can happen in the headlights sometimes, and the occasional water ingress into the boot due to the seals. So it's nothing crazy, but just things to keep an eye on. Overall though, it is a top tier Japanese performance car, so suffice it to say they put a whole lot of effort, time, thought and engineering into what they build, so it has far better reliability than the vast majority of its rivals, especially from places like Italy. Does it have the sex appeal? Not necessarily. Is it as pretty? Certainly not. Does it sound as good? Well, it's down to personal preference, but 9 times out of 10 probably not. But if performance is your thing, well, it's a Nissan GTR. It's kind of a byword for performance. And honestly, it's one of those cars where you kind of do feel like you're playing Gran Turismo in real life. It's that good, it's that faithful to how it would feel in a video game, and it's legitimately that quick. As I even mentioned in my original review, it was the first car I'd driven at the time wherein it kind of feels like you're actually in a Fast and Furious movie when you put your foot down, because the trees actually do kind of start to get blurry. And the only issue which I had with this car, which I don't necessarily want to apply to all of them because I don't know if this is an issue with all of them, is the seat was a bit too high. I tried to lower it as much as it could go, but it just didn't seem to want to go down far enough to give me good headroom, which is kind of ironic given the size of the car. When I drove the older one though, which of course you can check out the review of also here on the channel, that wasn't as much of an issue, so maybe it was just this car, I'm not sure. Overall though, that's it for my thoughts on the GTR. Of course, if you were an owner of one of these, if you still are, doesn't necessarily have to be a facelift. Drop your thoughts and stories and warnings and recommendations down below. And of course, stick around on the channel for more car reviews. If you are interested in more reviews as well, click the link on screen and you can see all of those in the playlist. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.